Let's talk about the last stand. You know, that moment in a battle when the odds are just completely, hopelessly stacked against you. Survival? That's not even on the table anymore. All that's left is defiance. A fight to make a statement, to prove a point that will echo long after you're gone.
Just listen to these words. This is a commander who knows he and his men are walking into certain death. And this is the very heart of a last stand. It's a promise made in the face of oblivion, and man, does it set the stage for the stories of impossible courage we're about to get into. All right, so for our first story, we're heading to the brutal eastern front of World War I. At a place called Osowiec Fortress, a battle in 1915 took a turn so horrifying, so surreal, that it went down in history as the closest thing to a real-life zombie attack. Seriously.
So here's the setup. Osowiec Fortress wasn't just some random fort. It was a critical choke point on a major railway line. For weeks, a small force of about 900 Russian defenders had somehow managed to hold off the massive German Imperial Army. But the Germans were getting tired of it, and they were about to try something new. On August 6, 1915, the Germans unleashed a brand new, terrifying weapon. A strange, thick green fog began to creep across no man's land towards the fortress. The Russian defenders, they had no gas masks. They had no idea what was coming. This gas, on contact with the moisture in their lungs, would turn into hydrochloric acid, literally dissolving them from the inside.
The effect was just as horrific as it sounds. Men were choking on their own blood. In desperation, they wrapped urine-soaked rags around their faces, but it did nothing. Their skin burned, their eyes went blind. And then, an eerie, dead silence fell over the whole fort. From the German lines, it looked like a total success.
So after about an hour, German soldiers, all wearing their gas masks, started to advance. They were walking through these trenches filled with the twisted, mangled bodies of the Russian defenders. They thought the fortress was theirs for the taking. They were so wrong.
As they moved through the silent fort, the Germans started to hear noises, haunting groans, gurgling, wet coughs. And then, one by one, the corpses started to get up. About 60 surviving Russians, horrifically maimed, with blood pouring from their eyes, literally coughing up pieces of their own lungs, grabbed their bayonets and charged. I mean, can you even imagine? The psychological shock was absolutely devastating. Seeing these undead men charging at them, the German lines just broke. They turned and fled in a complete panic. Men were getting shot, trampled by their own comrades, even impaling themselves on barbed wire in their desperation to get away. The siege was broken. The dead men had held the fort.
Okay, now let's jump way back to 1566 for an epic medieval siege. This is the story of one tiny fortress that dared to stand in the way of the most powerful empire on earth at the time, the mighty Ottomans.
The stakes here were absolutely massive. Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent was marching on Vienna, which was basically the heart of Europe. But this little fortress, commanded by his old rival, Nicola Zrinski, refused to step aside. And just look at those numbers. 2,300 defenders versus 100,000 attackers with 300 cannons. It was beyond hopeless.
Now, this fortress was brilliantly designed. It was actually 3 separate sections connected by bridges. This meant Zrinski could force the Ottomans to pay a heavy price in blood for every single inch of ground. For over a month, they fought like lions, falling back from the new town to the old town, and finally to the very last bastion, the citadel itself.
Suleiman was getting incredibly impatient. He even offered to make Zrinski the ruler of all Croatia if he would just give up. The Ottomans shot arrows with letters into the citadel promising the men their lives if they'd surrender, but every offer, every single threat, was met with total, defiant silence.
On September 7th, with the citadel literally burning down around them, Zrinski gathered his last 600 men. He gave this incredible speech, not about survival, but about dying a glorious death. He promised to lead them himself in one final, insane charge against an entire army.
And what a charge it was! The gates flew open. They fired a huge mortar point blank into the stunned Ottomans, and then just charged straight out. Zrinski was killed almost instantly, and his men were quickly overwhelmed. But he had one last trap. As the Ottomans poured into the citadel, a single wounded soldier lit the fuse to the gunpowder stores. The whole place went up in a massive explosion, killing another 3,000 of them.
All right, for our final story, we're going to what is probably the most mathematically impossible last stand in all of military history. This is the story of 21 soldiers holding a single tiny outpost against an army of 10,000. So, picture this. Saragarhi, a tiny little signaling station on the northwest frontier of British India. Its only purpose was to use mirrors and light to relay Morse code messages between two much larger forts. That's it. And was manned by just 21 Sikh soldiers from the British Indian Army. On September 12, 1897, the signalman spots a massive dust cloud on the horizon. It's an army of 10,000 Afghan tribesmen heading right for them. He quickly signals for help, and the reply he gets back is just heartbreaking. Cannot send reinforcements. They were completely on their own. Their commander, Havildar Ishar Singh, calmly told his 20 men that they would die, but that they would fight to the very last man to buy time for the other forts to prepare.
For the next 6 hours, these 21 men put on an absolute masterclass in defense. They were incredible marksmen and they fought off wave after wave of attackers. The Afghans even tried to bribe them, offering them safe passage and wealth if they just surrender. The only answer they got was more gunfire. Eventually, the attackers used smoke to cover their approach and breached a wall, and the fighting devolved into brutal hand-to-hand combat with bayonets and swords.
One by one, the defenders fell. Soon, only the signalman was left. The whole time, he had been relaying a play-by-play of the entire battle to Fort Lockhart. He sent one last message: permission to take up my rifle. Permission was granted. He then calmly packed up his signaling equipment, picked up his rifle, and is said to have killed dozens more attackers before the tribesmen finally managed to set his tower on fire.
The bravery is just off the charts. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found the bodies of the 21 Sikh soldiers, surrounded by the bodies of over 600 of their attackers. Think about that ratio. Those 21 men had sold their lives at an unbelievable cost to the enemy.
So, we've seen a horrifying chemical attack, a brutal medieval siege, and an impossible colonial defense. What's the common thread here? What turns a completely hopeless battle into something legendary, something that echoes through time?
Well, in every single one of these cases, what looked like a tactical defeat was actually a massive strategic victory. The dead men held the line at Osowiec. Zrinski's sacrifice cost the Ottomans their sultan and all their momentum, which probably saved Vienna. And the 21 Sikhs at Saragarhi bought just enough time for the main forts to get reinforced and hold the pass.
And that's the real takeaway here. A last stand isn't really about winning that specific fight. It's bigger than that. It's about shattering an enemy's morale, about buying precious, irreplaceable time for your allies, or about inspiring an entire nation. The fight itself ends, but the story of that defiance, that becomes a weapon all on its own.
And that really leaves us with this final question to chew on. All these soldiers, they knew they were going to die. So what makes that final ultimate sacrifice worthwhile? Is it a sense of duty? Is it about honor? Or is it maybe the belief that your story, the story of your defiance, will outlive you and mean something? Something to think about.